Military leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have announced visa-free travel and residency rights for citizens in the 15-member regional bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, ahead of their exit from the regional bloc. The three West African states ruled by military leaders said the visa and residency decision had been taken in the spirit of friendship and to strengthen centuries-old ties among African people. The tribe planned to withdraw from ECOWAS in January after refusing the bloc's demand to restore democratic rule. After a ministerial-level meeting in Niger's capital, Niamey, the three states said in a joint statement that their decision was irreversible. Well, let's have this conversation with Rise analyst Frank Tete on ECOWAS approval to Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso to leave the regional bloc in January. Thank you so much for your time, Frank Tete. I mean, this announcement has raised significant questions on the future of, unity and regional integration within the bloc. But the question is, what does this portend, for trade, security among the West African states?
The question is to be broadly considered when in the light of how much of application has been the revised treaty of 1993. It's very crucial that we've actually had the positive impact of the ECOWAS treaty in motion, in function, to the benefit of the various member states, especially in terms of economic progress. Have we experienced that? I think these countries are able to live that easily without considering the consequences, because there haven't actually been many benefits to the ECOWAS union before now. Many things have been quite unfortunate about it. It has been unable to prevent coups, military coups in various states. It has actually not maximized trade between the member states to the extent that we still have a lot of travel restrictions, irrespective of the notion that there's supposed to be a free movement of persons and goods across the ECOWAS region. So these countries are able to live, more especially exacerbated by the unfortunate situation of the number of jihadist movements that have not been able to be curtailed, whose I would say that their increase has not been curtailed. Don't to think about the widespread insecurity. Chad is now suffering quite unfortunately, that is suffering in the hands of invaders and bandits who are said to be shielded, or rather who find their refuge in Nigeria. The same problem we've had in Niger, in Mali, and Burkina Faso. So these countries, the leadership of these countries are now willing to leave the union because they think that there is no consequence, that there is absolutely nothing they are missing. So the immediate impact is that of actually taking another look at the ECOWAS arrangement, whether it has served its purpose or not.
Because fingers have also been pointed to the way ECOWAS, has handled this in a way when these problems started initially. But how effective do you think ECOWAS has handled it? Do you think it should have been handled differently?
Of course, it should have been different. It's a question of leadership. We've had very strong leadership in ECOWAS, and credit should be given to those Nigerian leaders. Unfortunately, military leaders, because even the ECOWAS itself was established by military leaders. I'm talking about General Gowon with other military leaders across the region. Now, but to think that when it was, whether it was General Abacha, who was, when he was chairman, ECOWAS was seen to be strong. And then the strongest of them all, the Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, former military general, also would have handled this case differently. And now to also bring the technicality of international law into it, what is the propriety of military heads of state in these countries exercising authority in the sense of, establishing or giving direction to the sovereignty of the Nigerian people, of the Malians, or Burkinabes? The point is, one would have argued, if I believe that from the antecedents of General Olusegun Obasanjo, he as head of state, he probably would have said, look, you guys are not the leaders of Mali, Burkina Faso, or Niger. So you can't be pulling out Niger and Burkina Faso or Mali from ECOWAS. You don't have the authority. And legal scholars could have argued that these countries are signatories to the Protocol on Good Governance and Democracy. These countries have agreed at every point in time that the only kind of governments that will be acceptable in these states are, I would say, is democratically elected government, and every form of truncation of that form of government will be punished. And these are countries that are already suffering ECOWAS sanctions. They are actually suspended. So how suddenly and how easily should the ECOWAS leadership accept their withdrawal, even though the revised treaty provides that any member state can actually give notice of 12 months before we withdraw, and that withdrawal becomes
just
effective.
quickly to look at some issues before I let you go. I mean, it's still open. Reversal is still open because ECOWAS said the door is still open if you're ready to come back. But the question will now be, diplomatic interventions and of course mediation required mutual willingness, to engage. Do you think Mali, this three country, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, are they open for dialogue?
No, because they see a weak leadership of ECOWAS at this time, so they're taking advantage of it. They are able to play smart and then to have their way, withdraw when the legitimacy of the action should have been questioned in the first place. Imagine if you had a gangster president in place who was going to, sorry to use gangster president in quote, who is able to deploy the Nigerian military to go and restore order in Niger. Right. You don't remove a democratically elected Mohamed Bazoum as president, and then the Nigerian president accepts it. But we saw the president and the Nigerian president at that time could have actually, initiated military action, but we saw all of those, interests that were rising against him, particularly from northern Nigeria. In that case, that was allowed. If that was opposed in the first place, then we would not be in this situation. So I think that it's quite unfortunate that we are allowing diplomacy when we could have actually used the force of treaty, the law of treaty, because we're talking about the Nigerian people, the Malians and the Burkinabes. They've entered a treaty that at every point in time there should be a democratically elected government. So what's happening? So ECOWAS is actually weak, and I doubt if diplomacy will work where force is actually supposed to be the answer.
I want to believe that oftentimes, we seems to focus on, what's on the table for negotiations. But more importantly, I think it's also important for us to focus on what's not on the negotiation table, to discuss. And having said that, what do you suppose, in this renegotiation or a proposal, which is on the table, what do you think ECOWAS is willing to offer?
I think ECOWAS should simply play according to the book and make it relevant to the people of the region. ECOWAS is simply more like a political arrangement that only backs but cannot bite. Are you talking about the ECOWAS court that makes decisions that it cannot enforce? Whether, it cannot enforce within or between member states? Or are you talking about a regional integration that doesn't work with a lot of, tariffs arrangements that actually don't encourage economic growth between the countries? Or are you talking about the biggest of them all, security arrangement, where you find Nigeria on its knees because of the invasions of bandits and jihadists who are coming from the Sahel, and then you now find countries like Chad or Mali or Burkina Faso and Niger, struggling with under the throes of massive colonial influence that does not aid their security and stability. So you find that ECOWAS, perhaps it's a time to renegotiate the entire ECOWAS treaty. Another time probably a broader revision, or unless ECOWAS positions itself to become more attractive to these countries that have now signaled their intention to leave, which will become automatic in January 2025 if the notice they gave in January 2024 is anything to go by. It's unfortunate these countries will just leave, and then we've just seen the disintegration of ECOWAS. And it's unfortunate that General Gowon is still alive to witness this, because he had very high dreams for ECOWAS, and we thought that by now would have had a region which would have meant for the prosperity of these countries, from Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Togo, and Benin. all of them would have been much more prosperous if the ECOWAS treaty was actually implemented. Unfortunately, we are not seeing leaders that are committed to it.
Well, lastly, of course, I do know that sometimes, apart from using the law of treaty, you also need to consider diplomacy as well. But having said that, there are concerns about the withdrawal of these countries within the Sahel. But again, the question would be how fragile is the current unity of the bloc? Because with this now, perhaps this has set antecedent for others to follow. And the concern is that they could lead to other countries within the regional bloc, to react again. So how fragile is the current unity of the bloc?
You see, the point is that you don't forget the involvement of Russia in the incursion of Russia in the geopolitics of the ECOWAS region.
Right.
So these countries perhaps find it safer in their resistance to French perceived imperialism, which was supposed to have been a thing of the past. So they have now, so there's a gravitation towards Russia in the hope that, Russian influence, I would say, in the hope that some measure of security and stability of the governments, protection of the military governments in place. So that may, to a large extent, stabilize it against the influence of forces, rebel forces and jihadis that want to topple those governments. Now, what a thing that ECOWAS couldn't provide for these countries. Now, in terms of fragility, Nigeria is ECOWAS. And also, if Nigeria is stable, ECOWAS can be stable. So the fact that Nigeria has been so troubled, it has been unable to win those, those insurgencies in the northeastern part of this country, that its own security has been largely compromised by, non-state actors, by unarmed groups across the entire country, is a major problem. Nigeria seems to be weak at this point. That's the reason why ECOWAS appears to be fragile. When Nigeria becomes strong, if Nigeria is to adopt the Obasanjo-style approach to international politics, where it sees Nigeria asserting more of its strength before talking much about diplomacy, we will see a stronger ECOWAS, and then we can renegotiate a point where ECOWAS can actually benefit its people. Can we really say ECOWAS has been beneficial to Ghanaians or to Nigerians in terms of trade? The answer is no. So let's renegotiate it. Let it be more attractive. Let it not be that France will be much more influential in these countries, determining how the resources of these countries are used against the interest of the people, and then we can now see a region that actually wants to determine its destiny within the larger context of the African Union. I think we're failing, and unfortunately this presents an opportunity for us to take an introspective look at what is happening, and Nigeria is supposed to lead the way.
We still have about a few months to the deadline. Perhaps, of course, the ECOWAS leadership will go to drawing boards to make that happen. Thank you so much, Rise analyst Frank Cheti, for joining us on Newsnight.
My pleasure.